welcome to Arts Express. This is Prairie Miller, and on the show, Pacifica host Garland Nixon on No Kings, No Prince, and Vampires, Werewolves, and Zombies. That's Donald Trump.
Hello, I'm Garland Nixon, standing in for the great George Galloway. The No Kings rally. The good thing about the No Kings rally is this. They already won. We don't have a king. How great is that? That you can have a rally. You know what? How about a No Martians rally? We don't have Martians either. I mean, to draw a bunch of people in and say, we're going to have a rally for something that we don't have. This is centrist liberalism today. In its finest form. It is, let's ask for nothing. Let's have a giant rally. Let's go to the streets, and we'll just simply say we don't want Donald Trump. The system's fine. The system's great. The system, maybe a little genocides every now and then. Maybe a possible nuclear war with another power. But that's not important now. What's important is Donald Trump says unfriendly things in tweets, and he embarrasses us. So we got to get rid of Donald Trump. Just in case you were wondering and you wanted to look into the No Kings rally a little bit, it is organized by an organization called indivisible.org. It has two co-founders, Leah Greenberg and Ezra Levin. It's a husband and wife duo. Interesting things about the two of them. Leah Greenberg, both of them have a background in NGOs. Leah Greenberg is a former State Department advisor. You'll find that pretty surprising, I guess. She worked for she was a lobbyist for Humanity United. That was an NGO founded and funded by eBay mogul Pierre Omidyar. And there's something else interesting about her. She worked in several capacities for Tom Piarello, former when he was running for governor of Virginia, and also when he was in the House of Representatives. She worked with him. And in fact, here's a guy that presided. He was the MC, the master of ceremonies at Ezra and Leah's wedding. Interesting thing about this guy is up until very recently, and I mean within the last few months, he was the, I don't know what the term is, CEO, whatever you want to call it. He was the leader of the Open Societies Foundation, of George Soros's foundation. So it's clearly obvious that these people are old in the game. They're old players in the game of regime change, of misleading people with propaganda. And now they have been able to sucker millions of people into the streets to say, we don't want a king when there isn't any kings. And oh, by the way, you can have a prince because, hey, England has one to spare, but you still gotta, allow him to live in multi-million-dollar mansion to enjoy life at the highest level, paid for by the rapidly impoverished British people. But he doesn't get to call himself Prince Andrew anymore. I guess he'll be in Dubai. Maybe he'll pick up more chicks there. He'll be like, hey, I'm just Andrew. Aren't you Prince Andrew, that guy that was like with the Virginia thing and Geoffrey? No. That was Prince Andrew. You can trust me. I'm just plain old Andrew. Why don't you get in my expensive car that's paid for by the British people so we can go out and have a good time? Boy, that guy's really getting his comeuppance, huh? That's the way it works. When you're part of this system, you do your dirt and you're amply rewarded, kind of like the mafia. I tell people I was in law enforcement. I know of an instance where there was a mafia guy when I was in law enforcement. He was arrested and he wouldn't talk. No matter what, he was facing 30 years. He wouldn't talk. And instead of 30 years, his lawyer was able to get him out, get like 3 years. He was out in like 18 months. True story. When he got out, his mafia bosses took bulldozers, bulldozed his house, which was on the water, and built a giant mansion. And new boats, speed boats, these Miami vibes, everything. That was his reward for keeping his mouth shut. And that's the way it works. And now, if you think about it, is it an accident that Prince Andrew, in the same week that he's exposed as a maniacal abuser of young girls, of impoverished and emotionally damaged young girls, and in the same week that he's exposed, is that $10 million. Oh, Andrew, things are kind of rough. You're going to have to give up the Prince part. I tell you what, I know it feels bad. Here's 10 million. Why don't you spruce up your Windsor Castle or whatever the hell over there? And, you make up for it. And we'll give you another 10 million next week. After all, what do the British people need this 10 million for? They just wasted on food and lodging and eating and things like that. That's not important now. We're going to move forward. Donald Trump. Let me add this about Trump. This whole No Kings March misses the reality about Donald Trump. It is liberal centrism today to say the system is fine. The system is great. A little bit of, maybe a genocide every now and then, but we can overlook that. That Donald Trump is the problem. It's just Trump. That all we'd have to do is get rid of Donald Trump and this system would be perfectly fine. In fact, the way liberal centrism works, especially the so-called liberal lefties of today works, is like this. We are to ensure that when the government has, let's say, $1 trillion, our job is to ensure that the working class gets a part of that $1 trillion. Of course, we got to get a part with our NGOs, but the working class gets a part of it. They get some into their health care. They get a piece of the pie. It is the liberal so-called lefties today is about a piece of the pie. Hey, we want to make sure that the people that we represent get the biggest or at least a fair piece of the pie. But what we are never allowed to talk about is how many bodies from Africa and Latin America and Asia and the Middle East are baked into that pie. You see, liberal leftdom today, leftness, whatever you want to call it, in the West is pro-colonial. It's pro-imperial. It's pro-regime change war. So we can just ignore that Maria Corina Machado from Venezuela just got the Nobel War Prize. And as she is literally calling for a regime change war attack on her country, that's not important right now. It's that Donald Trump is tweeting bad things. We can kind of ignore that Donald Trump right now and the U.S. empire is sending warships towards Venezuela to threaten the Venezuelan people. Because Maduro is a dictator. But there is one contradiction. I got to throw a contradiction for the Maduro dictator part of this. Maduro's a dictator. And the people hate him. Obviously, because you'd hate a dictator. Well, who wants to be dictated to? So he's arming his people. Venezuelan government has given out millions of arms, military-grade arms, AK-47s, bullets, you name it, to the people so that they can fight to defend their revolution. That's a contradiction, isn't it? I mean, if he was an evil dictator and the people hated him and he gave them guns, they'd point the guns at him, wouldn't they? It would seem to me that the people know what direction to point the guns. So why would it? And historically speaking, when is an evil dictator, Vlad, the evil Putin that we've been told in Russia and the Chinese government and Maduro, we're told evil dictators, but somehow the people in those countries don't agree. But this particular dictator, being the most evil, has said, I will literally arm the people of my country. And they're not going to turn their guns on me. They're going to use the guns to fight and defend their democracy. That doesn't add up, doesn't it? Does it? Doesn't sound like a dictator to me. And I'll say this about Donald Trump. Let me say this about Trump when it comes to the issue of Venezuela and the No Kings business. I personally think Donald Trump is the best representative that America has ever had. As a guy who, I'm old school, I love the old horror movies, vampires and werewolves and, zombies. That's kind of the foundation of horror movies, right? And in the vampire movies, Fright Night being one of my favorite, in the vampire movies, what happened? The vampire would be either some handsome, dashing man or some gorgeous, voluptuous sexual woman. She was never slim. She was voluptuous. She was bombshell shaped, right? And she's in bars and the guys see her, or this guy's handsome. The women, they're hypnotized by their beauty, amongst other things. And eventually they're lured back to wherever the evil deed will happen. And at some point, the vampire transforms into this demonic-looking figure with, the long nails and the fangs, etc. And at that point, the person realizes that they've been had. They're like, uh-oh, this ain't a pretty hot girl that I met in the bar. This is an evil demonic being, and I suspect I'm about to be get bitten in the neck, right? It's Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not he is America, but he's not the dashing, good-looking, handsome vampire in the bar. When he walks into the bar, the fangs are already out. And that makes it harder to get a victim. And all of the potential victims can look at the vampire and say, hey, I want no part of that guy. I suspect he'll do something very, very mean to me if I give him the opportunity. That's why Donald Trump is bad for America, but he's good for the world. He's bad for the working class, but he's good for the world, because the world can see the brutality, the barbarism, and the savagery of U.S. imperialism and colonialism, period. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the centrist liberal class refused to accept that, because you know what? They just want to make sure that everybody gets a piece of the pie. This red, trust me, it's a red pie, and that ain't cherry juice. It ain't a cherry pie. That's the blood of the people of Africa. And right now, it's the blood of the Palestinians, and it's the blood of the Asians. And you know what? There are a lot of people in this country that are not, in this world, that are not willing to give their blood anymore. So, I think to some extent we could thank Donald Trump and say, Donald Trump, you are the representation of America that we've been waiting for 250 years. A lot of us internally know it's there, but there were other people that watched a Hollywood movie and they thought, hey, you know what? I think that when I turn 25 in America, I will be issued a Ferrari and a beautiful supermodel. That ain't the way it happens. That's not the way it happens.
And coming up next on the show.
In New York, they're trying to elect a communist, Zoran Mamdani. This guy is a communist at the highest level, and he wants to destroy New York. I love New York, and we're not going to let him do that. Generations of Americans before us did not shed their blood only so that we could surrender our country to Marxist lunatics.
So with the New York City election for mayor around the corner and all that talk about candidate Zoran Mamdani being a communist or not, The Daily Show's Desi Lydic decided to set things straight about that C word with Let's Ask a Communist.
There's an election happening in New York City, and one candidate is making people see red.
Self-proclaimed New York City communist Zoran Mamdani,
who is a socialist communist.
Well, Mamdani the communist.
An avowed communist.
I call him my little communist.
Well, love him or hate him, everyone seems to agree. This guy's a communist.
You're saying Mamdani's a communist?
I'm not saying that. People are saying that.
Really? How come nobody told me? I'm a co-chair of the Communist Party.
Co-chair?
Co-chair.
Wow, they really make you share everything, don't they?
Well, it's better. Cooperation is the name of the game.
According to Joe Sims, co-chair of the Communist Party, we're using the C word all wrong. So you're saying he's not a communist?
Not at all, no. He's a democratic socialist.
Okay, so explain the difference to me between the Communist Party and the Democratic Socialists.
Well, the Communist Party believes that capitalism needs to be replaced fundamentally.
Joe, what's so distasteful about capitalism anyway?
Everything.
Really? I disagree. Ooh, my package is here. I'm waiting for this. Ugh, it's the wrong color. Ugh. What were you saying?
Anyway, socialists in this country generally believe that capitalism can be reformed, but also socialists believe that they can function within the framework of the Democratic Party. But we don't believe that the Democratic Party can be reformed.
Well, I agree with you there. Oh, God, does that make me a communist? All my life, I thought communism was about military parades, dictatorships, and using the full apparatus of the state to train one single boxer.
I must break you.
Oh, Mama.
We've gotten a bad name over the years, a bad reputation, I should say. People believe that communism and socialism means government control, but that's not true.
No?
No, not at all. Socialism, communism, and democracy are not opposites. And one of the great things is that you should be able to choose what you do. Perhaps you'd like to run a food co-op. And if you don't want to run a food co-op, maybe you'd like to run a farm. And if you don't want to run a farm, maybe you'd like to run a theater company.
I don't think so.
Maybe you'd like to be a fisher person.
Nope. No.
A park ranger.
Ugh.
No park ranger.
Hate animals.
How about an astronaut?
I'm terrified of space.
Tell me what you'd like to do. You can spend more time with your family.
Ugh, that's the worst. So communism isn't for me, but why do people think that Mamdani supports it?
Mamdani.
He's a communist.
What is it exactly that you think people see Mamdani doing that would cause them to call him a commie?
He champions affordability. Any effort to put forward an idea of a more equitable distribution of wealth is labeled socialist or communist in an effort to just dismiss it out of hand. It's called red baiting.
Red baiting.
Red baiting, anti-communism, goal is to just divide people. That's what happened to us during the McCarthy period, you know?
Okay, but McCarthyism was 70 years ago. Surely we've learned our lesson by now.
Members of Congress and even former presidents have been openly embracing vile creeds such as socialism, Marxism, and straight-up communism.
AOC, the little communist from New York City.
Comrade Kamala Harris is a radical left Marxist communist fascist.
Can the commie cavalry save the day?
Okay, that sounds a lot like red baiting. But how do we know for sure that the Democratic Party isn't full of communists? Joe, it was time to name names.
Not a communist. No. AOC is what she says she is.
Not a communist. That's a no. Right.
Please, no.
No?
No, not a communist.
Not a communist.
No.
So none of these Democrats are communists. You know, people really need to stop throwing around the C word. It's insulting to actual commies, like my friend Joe.
It's up to me to set the record straight and remind people that words matter. How do you feel about Mamdani?
I think he's extremely dangerous. I would categorize him as a communist.
But he's not a communist.
I think that he may be a communist.
You are going to be so relieved to hear this. I just learned he is not a communist. He is a democratic socialist.
Well, he can call himself that.
I spoke to the co-chair of the Communist Party, and there's actually a pretty significant difference. See, communists believe that the capitalist system cannot be reformed. Democratic socialists, they fundamentally make changes within the framework of the Democratic Party, has been captured by the billionaire class. But I'm sure you already know all that.
I disagree with you.
Okay.
I apologize.
So even though people weren't convinced, if we're going to be divided, at least the red baiting will be word perfect.
And coming up next on Arts Express.
Their only link is that they were walking through Montmartre after dark. He leaves no witnesses. He makes no mistakes.
There's been another one, Chief. That's your man again, Maigret. 2 stab wounds, one to the back of the neck, one to the chest.
Who's the killer, Maigret?
The man you're looking for is a man of taste. I have to try to draw him out before he kills again.
You put policewoman on the street last night as bait.
The whole of Paris has theories, Chief Inspector.
You are?
So, you will find him. How many more dead women do they need?
You feel special, even though you're not. Are you?
And those were scenes with one of the many screen manifestations of French detective Jules Maigret, portrayed by Rowan Atkinson, among at least 34 actors on the big and small screen for nearly a century, based on the work of immensely prolific Belgian crime writer Georges Simenon, the author of 400 novels, 21 memoirs, and short stories, selling over 500 million copies. And writer-director Patrick Harbinson is our guest on the show to talk about his current PBS incarnation of Maigret, starring Ben Wainwright. First, some scenes from the 1949 Maigret classic, The Man on the Eiffel Tower, starring Charles Laughton, then a conversation with Patrick Harbinson about crime, chaos, class, the military, and the enduring mass consciousness fascination with social turmoil on screen.
What happened?
She said someone killed her.
Killed who?
The old lady. Look at my hands.
You idiot. Here we planned a nice, simple robbery. Chance to get your woman some money. And look what you've done.
I didn't do it.
Don't think for a moment I'm throwing doubt on your professional capacity. If in this case you understand less than nothing, it's only because right from the start you've been working on falsified data. And everything you'll find out will be wrong. Right to the very end. You can't make out what I'm up to, can you?
Mr. Kirby, are you your aunt's heir?
I believe so, yes.
Do you happen to know of anyone who might have wanted to kill your aunt?
No one. Well, when they let him go, send him around to me. If he'll get rid of my aunt the same way, I'll give him $1 million francs.
Inspector, are you going to try to connect me with Kirby's death? I hope you do try.
Hello.
Lovely to be here.
Well, hello, Patrick Harbinson, and welcome to our show. Now, what is your fascination with Maigret that led you to want to come on board to create this new series?
I'd always loved Simenon, and I'd watched the previous two Brit versions, Michael Gambon in the 90s and Rowan Atkinson in the last decade, and enjoyed them both. But felt when I was approached and asked if I was interested in taking on Simenon and Maigret again, I thought about it, and I felt that both of those series didn't, to my mind, capture everything that there was in Simenon. His vitality, energy, the raciness, and the darkness sometimes, and the humor often of those brilliant novels. And I felt that if I could use my experience in harder thriller writing, I might be able to give a new and bracing version of Maigret for a new audience.
And how would you compare or contrast your perspective on Maigret in relation to Simeon's or the many others who have dramatized Maigret for nearly a century, from Charles Laughton in The Man in the Eiffel Tower in 1950 to Gerard Depardieu and beyond?
I think my difference is caught in those actors you're talking about, really. Once we'd made the decision to cast a young Maigret, it opened up, obviously, the whole casting pool. We auditioned 130, I think roughly more than 130 English, Irish, and Australian actors, brilliant actors for the role, until we settled on Benjamin Wainwright. What I wanted was youth to give us a different pace to the stories, because if you imagine Depardieu in his most recent Maigret, which I loved, it is about mood and presence. You have a large and looming and thoughtful man, and you have honestly a ponderous sort of psychological narrative. I was interested in the original meaning of ponderous, which is thoughtful, ponderoso. And that to me did not mean we had to be slow. So one of my first directorial notes to Ben, was brood quickly. The young Maigret is restless. He has not yet earned the experience that those actors you mentioned were able to project on screen. This Maigret is still learning, making mistakes, getting angry, failing, etc., etc.
And you've been in the military as well. Would you say that's influenced your writing approach in Maigret and other productions conceptually in any way?
Um, it's might be it's influenced my timekeeping. Um, no. What the military taught me was how people speak to each other in in moments of stress and fear, and in moments of overwhelming boredom and anger. So I learned how a whole range of society can speak to each other. It really was a lesson in voices. That was the most interesting thing, and hierarchies, and teamwork, and the strength of a unit, how and leadership. So it taught me a lot of life lessons. But as a writer, I think that was the biggest thing, was just listening to people speak.
And what could you say about, or what are your thoughts about the mass consciousness of audiences drawn to Maigret and the detective genre in general, and as perhaps an embrace of fictional problem solvers in response to the elusive, chaotic modern world today?
I think your question has its own answer. Because I hadn't heard that phrase, the fictional problem solver. I will steal it from you because I think that's it. You know? So it's that. I mean, and it's, you know, the first detective I loved was Marlowe reading, and I loved him because of Chandler. So and that's a very, very dry and ironic and form of problem solving. So. It's that. I mean, I think you said it perfectly. It's problem solving in a chaotic world, and the world has always been chaotic. I mean, America in the 70s was every bit as sort of divided and strife-ridden as it is today. There's no question. So I think, you know, our present strife is always the one that overwhelms us and makes us seek for those, as you say, fictional problem solvers. And I think our Maigret in a contemporary Paris is another great example of that. I think anyone watching this series is going to be introduced to a world that they know but don't quite know, and a series of stories and characters that they won't quite have imagined, but they will be drawn to them, and they'll be led on what I hope is uh, an interesting and deeply satisfying and intriguing journey.
Mm. And how would you compare culturally creating work for your U.S. productions with Maigret?
I had the advantage of having worked in LA for more than 20 years on some um, quite good shows. So I knew the American, I know, I think I know the American audience pretty well. And the PBS audience is slightly different, I think, because I'd worked on the first Inspector Morse, which started in the, I think, mid 80s, and second Inspector Morse. I was head of drama development at Central Television when we commissioned the first scripts. So that was my first experience working with Masterpiece Theatre. And I did it quite a few times after that. So I know that the Masterpiece audience is very literate. It's big, it's literate, and so it demands high quality work. And so that was very much, and so I knew I could. There were certain things I could do for them that I might not dare to do for an American network like Fox or NBC. That they would be more patient of a slightly slower pace, but not as slow as the earlier Maigrets that I talked about, and a more cerebral approach to storytelling, to scene writing.
And what would you say to George Simeon about your production of his work if he were alive today? And what do you think he would feel about the massive works in tribute to his writing endlessly today as well?
That's a great question. Um, I hope he would ask me to come and get drunk with him. I'm sure he would. I I think there'd be things he wouldn't like. And remember, I was working with his son, John Simenon, throughout. So I did, if you like, have a kind of line to the Simenon family. And as I've said before, the biggest argument we had, well, we had discussions all the way through. Once we'd cast Ben Wainwright, John said to me, he said, "Now I understand everything you're trying to do." It was just simply having a young Maigret's face. Then he understood the sort of the looser dialogue, the slangier dialogue, the ruder dialogue, frankly, between Les Maigret and the others. He didn't quite, and how Louise Maigret talked. It was still for him, John, even though he accepted it was contemporary Paris, he was still seeing, I think, Maigret and Madame Maigret in the sort of petit bourgeois relationship that they have in the novels. So that was a shock to him. And I just think his dad, who was a very well-traveled, deeply experienced man, thousands of lovers, marriages, not only three marriages, but still lots of marriages, long relationship with Josephine Baker in 30s Paris, a man of the world. I think he would enjoy the humor that I've pulled out of his books because I think they're really quite witty. And I think he would enjoy the violence that I found there. And I think he would enjoy the contemporizing too, because he was writing, Simon himself was writing, always writing contemporary Paris. He was not writing period Paris. So I think he'd enjoy that. I think maybe like John, he'd object to the fact that the first meal we see that Madame Maigret and Maigret having is a Vietnamese takeout. John really hated that beginning to end. But I said to him, that's contemporary Paris. They're two busy people. They'll have a takeout.
And what can you say in your production about, speaking of class, the class contrast between, say, the police and suspects or villains?
It's always fascinating, isn't it? It's one thing that makes crime writing always so interesting. And I'm as a Brit, I'm fascinated by class, of course. And it's it just gives scenes an edge. I mean, if you've watched the whole series, you'll see that episodes 3 and 4, the middle block, where you have a retail billionaire, a kind of Jeff Bezos, but a sort of hugely overweight man who bullies his staff and everything. He's an exercise in class resentment. He's been teased as a kid, and he uses that as fuel for this enormous ambition and has achieved extraordinary things. He's a huge success and yet he's paranoid and unhappy. So I think that, and seeing Maigret and sort of being able to, Maigret wearing this ratty old trench coat and being able to sneer at him gives him immense satisfaction. He says, look at me, look at you now. Oh, well. So I think class is it just gives, you need to be, I think every writer needs to be aware of class, because I think every person, especially in Europe, would be is aware of history stretching behind them. And when they walk into any room with a group of people, there is this sort of automatic radar that seizes on everyone, registers them, measures them, and sort of allocates a particular place to them. And for a policeman, that's a very useful guide. And Maigret is interesting to me as someone who is completely classless. He does not care. He gets on well with beggars and kings.
And are you working on anything else right now or contemplating anything else?
I have just finished another Maigret film, which I'm delighted with, just the writing of it. And right now I'm working on a thriller for ITV about the water industry in the UK. So always things going on. But Maigret has been a lovely journey, and I sincerely hope it continues.
Yeah. And what would you hope to convey to audiences about your Maigret?
I hope they, it's interesting. I hope they see it's possible for a young man to have wisdom, even though he's capable of anger and fear and failure, that he is deeply empathetic and that he truly lives out that Simenon saying to understand and judge not. That I hope they get that out of the character and out of the series. I hope they watch. I hope they find a very good looking, because I think it is a good looking series. Budapest was a wonderful home for us. Welcoming, intriguing, and ultimately really warm series that just really delivers on everything we tried to give it. Complicated stories with real people and real emotions. I genuinely think it's a terrific journey, the first series, and I know that if we go again, we can do it better.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Patrick Harbinson, for joining us on the show.
Thank you very much. It was lovely to talk.
Hey, this is Carmine Peace with Vanilla Fuzz, and you're on the Arts Express with Prairie Miller. And we came up with this version when it was done And every time I listened to it, I found myself like it was very hypnotic, you know, because the song keeps rolling around. It's not like here's a verse, here's a chorus. It keeps rolling, you know. By the end of the song, I found myself going back and starting over and listening to it again and again. You know, I listened to the music, I played to the music, I played to the vocals, and I just kept in my head, this is what I do, you know. People say, what's your hobby? This is my hobby. So whatever it takes, it's awesome. Just comment a piece, keep rocking.
When I look outside my window, what do I see? And when I look outside my window, so many different people to be. That it's strange, so strange. You've got to pick up every stitch. Two rabbits running in a ditch. The hippies are to make it rich. Oh no, must be the season of the witch. Must be the season of the witch. Must be the season of the witch.
And now on Arts Express.
Hi, this is Jack Shalom, and now a little Halloween cheer with a short story by Edgar Allan Poe, The Black Cat. Mad am I not, and very surely do I not dream. But tomorrow I die, and today I would unburden my soul. From my infancy, I was noted for the docility and humanity of my disposition. My tenderness of heart was even so conspicuous as to make me the jest of my companions. I married early, and was happy to find in my wife a disposition not uncongenial with my own. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, and a cat. This cat was a remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he attended me whenever I went about the house. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general character, because of the fiend intemperance, had experienced a radical alteration for the worse. I grew, day by day, more regardless of the feelings of others. I used intemperate language to my wife. At length, I even offered her personal violence. My disease grew upon me. For what disease is like alcohol? Even Pluto, began to experience the effects of my ill temper. One night, returning home much intoxicated, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him. In his fright at my violence, he inflicted a slight wound upon my hand with his teeth. The fury of the demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife. I grasped the poor beast by the throat and deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket. I blush. I burn. I shudder while I pen this damnable atrocity. With the morning, I plunged into excess and soon drowned in wine all memory of the deed. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented a frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. Then came the spirit of perverseness. One morning, in cold blood, I slipped a noose about its neck and hung it to the limb of a tree. Hung it because I knew that it had loved me. Hung it because I knew that in so doing I was committing a sin, even beyond the reach of the infinite mercy of the most merciful and most terrible God. On the night of the day on which this cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The whole house was blazing. It was with great difficulty that my wife, a servant, and myself made our escape. The destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was found in a wall which stood about the middle of the house. The plastering had here resisted the action of the fire. I approached and saw, as if graven upon the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat. There was a rope about the animal's neck. For months, I could not rid myself of the phantasm of the cat, and during this period there came back into my spirit a half-sentiment that seemed but was not, remorse. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal and to look for another pet of somewhat similar appearance with which to replace it. One night, as I sat, half stupefied in a den of more than infamy, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object. It was a black cat, a very large one, fully as large as Pluto and closely resembling him in every respect, but one. This cat had a large, although indefinite splotch of white covering the region of the breast. When I prepared to go home, the animal evinced a disposition to accompany me. When it reached the house, it domesticated itself at once and became immediately a great favorite with my wife. For my own part, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. By slow degrees, these feelings of disgust and annoyance rose into the bitterness of hatred. What added, no doubt, to my hatred of the beast was the discovery on the morning after I brought it home that, like Pluto, it also had been deprived of one of its eyes. With my aversion to this cat, however, its partiality for myself seemed to increase. I longed to destroy it with a blow, yet I withheld myself from so doing, partly by a memory of my former crime, but chiefly by absolute dread of the beast. This dread was not exactly a dread of physical evil, and yet I should be at a loss how otherwise to define it. My wife had called my attention more than once to the character of the mark of white hair of the beast. This mark, although large, had at length assumed a rigorous distinctness of outline. It was now the image of a hideous, of a ghastly thing, of gallows. Oh, mournful and terrible engine of horror and crime. And now was I indeed wretched beyond the wretchedness of mere humanity. Alas, neither by day nor by night do I knew the blessing of rest any more. I started hourly from dreams of unutterable fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face and its vast weight, an incarnate nightmare that I had no power to shake off. Beneath the pressure of torments such as these, the feeble remnant of the good within me succumbed. Evil thoughts became my sole intimates, the darkest and most evil of thoughts. One day, my wife accompanied me upon some household errand into the cellar of the old building which our poverty compelled us to inhabit. The cat followed me down the deep, steep stairs, and nearly throwing me headlong, exasperated me to madness. Uplifting an axe, I aimed a blow at the animal, but this blow was arrested by the head of my wife. Goaded by the interference into a rage, I withdrew my arm from her grasp and buried the axe in her brain. She fell dead upon the spot without a groan. This hideous murder accomplished, I set myself to the task of concealing the body. I determined to wall it up in the cellar, displace the bricks, insert the corpse, and wall the whole up as before so that no eye could detect anything suspicious. And by means of a crowbar, I easily dislodged the bricks, and having carefully deposited the body against the inner wall, I propped it up in that position. Then I relaid the whole structure as it originally stood. When I had finished, the wall did not present the slightest appearance of having been disturbed. My next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness, for I had at length firmly resolved to put it to death. But it appeared that the crafty animal forbore to present itself in my present mood. It is impossible to describe the deep, blissful sense of relief which the absence of the detested creature occasioned in my bosom. It did not make its appearance during the night. And thus, for one night at least, since its introduction into the house, I soundly and tranquilly slept, even with the burden of murder upon my soul. The second and the third day passed, and still my tormentor came not. Upon the fourth day of the assassination, a party of the police came very unexpectedly into the house and proceeded to make rigorous investigation of the premises. Secure, however, in the inscrutability of my place of concealment, I felt no embarrassment whatever. The police were thoroughly satisfied and prepared to depart. I burned to say but one word by way of triumph. "Gentlemen," I said at last, as the party ascended the steps, "I delight to have allayed your suspicions. I wish you all health. Are you leaving? Oh, by the by, gentlemen, this is a very well-constructed house. These walls are solidly put together. And here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily with the cane which I held in my hand upon that very portion of the brickwork behind which stood the corpse of my wife. But no sooner had the reverberation of my blows sunk into silence than I was answered by a voice from within the tomb, by a cry, at first muffled and broken like the sobbing of a child, and then quickly swelling into one long, loud, and continuous scream, utterly anomalous and inhuman, a howl, a wailing shriek, half of horror and half of triumph, such as might have arisen only out of hell, conjointly from the throats of the damned in their agony, and of the demons that exult in the damnation. For one instant, the police upon the stairs remained motionless through extremity of terror and of awe. In the next, a dozen stout arms were toiling at the wall. It fell bodily. The corpse, already greatly decayed and clotted with gore, stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. Upon its head, with red extended mouth and solitary eye of fire, sat the hideous beast whose craft had seduced me into murder, and whose informing voice had consigned me to the hangman. I had walled the monster up within the tomb. You've been listening to our Arts Express radio adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's jolly little tale, The Black Cat. This is Jack Shalom for Arts Express with host Prairie Miller.
And that's all we have time for today on Arts Express, Expression in the Arts. And if you'd like to express yourself too, you can write to us at theradiogoddess@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Prairie Miller leaving the station.